I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about reflections on yesterday evening with the four mayors who I think set the stage for our discussion today. And also talking a little bit about the whole idea of transformative strategies or transformation or innovation and entrepreneurship. You know, one of the opportunities that I've had among those that Judith mentioned is to work on behalf of World Business Chicago to create a plan for economic growth and for job creation in Chicago. And I think everybody that is from Chicago in the audience will know that our effort was not to be the first ever effort to create a plan for economic development or economic growth for Chicago. Indeed, there have been many. Ours, however, had a transformative idea, a big idea associated with it, which is simply that we wanted it to be actionable. We didn't want it only to be interesting reading, and we didn't want it to end up on the shelf a week after we published it. So one of the words that we heard, I think, from all four mayors last night, which resonates in the private sector, is the word accountability. And I'm convinced that to create a partnership, as Judith mentioned, between the private sector and the public sector, certain values along the way have to be shared. And best intentions and virtuous work are really insufficient. You know, the best intentions over a period of time led us in Chicago to a trajectory in the 10 years prior to the commencement of the work that I described a moment ago that was uncompetitive. When Mayor Emanuel introduced the plan, he referred to it as a lost decade of opportunity. So let's think about that for a moment. One of the opportunities we had to transform things was to reverse the decline, which I'm sure we can hear a little more about later on with respect to challenges of another city. But we had to arrest a decline, and at the same time, candidly, or contemplate arresting a decline, and at the same time, we had to speak to the fact that the decline wasn't well appreciated. So there was a sense, actually, of reasonable well-being across the spectrum of the city that works. But in fact, we had been experiencing a great deal of wealth transfer from Chicago, and not only Chicago, but also the Midwest to the Southwest and to the Southeast. And also, obviously, to Shanghai and to Singapore and to Mexico City and to Buenos Aires and to other competitive cities. So one of the things we had to recognize transformatively as framers of the plan was that today, despite the fact that Chicago is well on its way to being a global megacity, Chicago doesn't get a free drop. You know, Chicago has to compete. And if Chicago doesn't compete, Chicago isn't going to win its place among the global megacities of the future. And we have many peer cities that we can all think of, many in the Midwest, but not only in the Midwest, who have lost their competitive position. And in losing their competitive position, they've lost their opportunity to be a genuine global city. Judith mentioned my time and experience at United Airlines. There's much that connects Judith and Glenn. Judith is on the board of American Airlines. So you can imagine our private conversations about that. But at the end of the day, if you think of those two, American Airlines and United Airlines here in Chicago, one of the indicators of substance and opportunity for a city such as Chicago is a direct flight to Asia, or a direct flight to Europe, or a direct flight to Latin America or Russia. Cities that don't have that hub status, which I actually think endows upon the city an acknowledgement of its relevance and of its status, begin to lose the stuff that it takes to execute one of the strategies of the 10 that I'm actually going to read to us in a moment from the plan that allows the city to go out and attract further commitment to the city from businesses that aren't currently headquartered in the city. One of the first things that a team representing an entity, an enterprise, wants to know, especially a global company, when we are competing as cities for its headquarters status, is can my employees get from where it is that you would have me be to Beijing or Singapore or Shanghai or Hong Kong directly? Or must I connect? That is a significant indicator of relevance for a city. All of the other things that we heard about yesterday, safety, security, transportation, neighborhoods, workforce development, all part of the fabric, both intellectual, emotional, and financial, that make up a great city. But you have to compete on every single one of them to be a true candidate to become a megacity, where frankly, as I think Mayor Parker reminded us yesterday, 12% of the population in cities across the United States, some 70-odd% of the GDP emanating from cities. So an extraordinary mismatch in the context of population and wealth. So something truly to think about. So in the context of innovation, entrepreneurship, but at the same time, legacy and fact-based understanding of the legacy of a particular city, and companies in the private sector, within cities that are not startups, but indeed legacy, historic companies that want to obviously exercise innovation themselves, but want to create a laboratory in which they're able to do so and to make a commitment to the city that encourages them to do so. And that's perhaps not what we think of immediately when we think of innovation. But these companies have an opportunity to reinvent themselves, but they can only be successful if they're given the environment and the foundation, the platform in which to do so. So let's think about these 10 strategies, because I think that well, let me assure you, they took a lot of work. There was a lot of debate, and there was a lot of commitment that once we were in a position for me to be able to hold the plan up and show it to you, we would also have to make a commitment that we were going to execute against it, which I frankly think is going to be the more difficult part of everything. Framing the plan, one thing, rigorous, but actually executing against these 10 strategies and giving all of you the opportunity to think about Chicago in the context of them, frankly, is where I think the proof point of whether or not we're going to be successful or not lies. Because we are talking about, remember, arresting a decline. Now, arresting a competitive decline where, frankly, our economy has not grown commensurate with the rest of the country, and our economy has not created jobs at a pace commensurate with the rest of the country. So think about that as an enabler for everything that everybody wants to talk about as to what will make or continue to preserve Chicago's greatness. Number one, become a leading hub of advanced manufacturing. That in itself is enough to challenge all that, frankly, we want to develop to attract entrepreneurship. To have that advanced manufacturing hub here attracts all of the attributes that we know make up a great city and an innovative city. Increase the region's attractiveness as a center for business services and headquarters. We talked about that for a moment. Enhance our competitive position as a leading transportation and logistics hub. I mentioned that a moment ago. Make Chicago a premier destination for tourism and entertainment. We historically typically lag cities such as Orlando and Las Vegas in doing so, but for no real good reason. And we have every opportunity to prosecute that strategy. And many in the audience probably perceive that we don't lag, or we haven't historically lagged. But in fact, the data show that we do. Make Chicago a nationally leading exporter. We have a great opportunity here as well for small and medium-sized companies, which would be transformative for them if they haven't historically understood how it is that I might be able to export to an offshore market. Develop our workforce in a demand-driven and targeted manner. Here's an area where so much effort has been deployed in workforce development to such disappointing results, statistically, fact-based, analytically, that it's a huge opportunity and we need to perceive it as such. And here's where I think a private-public partnership would be hugely important to improve the quality of our workforce development effort and the results associated with it. Mark Rigdon, who's here in the audience, is on that team to affect that strategy. Support entrepreneurship and foster innovation in mature and emerging sectors, what I said a moment ago. We can be just as successful in fostering entrepreneurship in United Airlines and J.P. Morgan Chase as we can in startups. Invest to create next-generation infrastructure. We heard the mayors talk about that last night, and we heard the mayor of Houston lay down a challenge in saying that Houston's going to have the finest infrastructure of all the cities across the United States. Develop and deploy neighborhood assets to align with regional economic growth. Very difficult for Chicago to succeed when the surrounding region does not. And create an environment in which businesses can flourish. And this one's very transparent. What it means is eliminate the roadblocks that exist today in Chicago to do business. Debureaucratize the process. I'm going to stop here because my time has lapsed, but one of the things I want to say that really dawned on me over the multi-month period that I co-chaired this effort with Michael Sachs and Tony Anderson on behalf of the mayor is transformation, when you consider where we are in Chicago and where we've historically been competitively, is not what it might intuitively seem to everybody. Transforming that which we have historically tried to do and not done as well as we should have, that's compelling transformation, and I'll offer you up the proposition that it's actually more difficult than transforming something that doesn't yet exist and doesn't have a legacy of frustration. So if you don't remember anything else that I say, remember that, because there's an emotional resistance to that change, because there's a way of doing it now, hasn't been successful, but it has adherence and people don't want to let it go, such as a bureaucracy. There are inhabitants of bureaucracies, and once they're in there, they find it rather comfortable, and frankly, getting them out to move in a way that's de-bureaucratizing is not easy. So I'm a keen fan of the plan. I think it's unique to Chicago. I think Chicago's put together a very focused, actionable plan. Representing the private sector, being co-chair on behalf of World Business Chicago, I was really very pleased that we had the opportunity to contribute to it. And I think, frankly, what we are going to be able to do is going to speak to much of what we're going to hear this week relative to cities and ideas. Thanks very much for your time.